Hi, Tony here today, and I'm with Christopher Avery. How are you today, Christopher?
I'm free, powerful, and that choice, Tony. How are you?
I'm brilliant. Listen, I'm here with Christopher Avery now. I'm very lucky to have met Christopher Avery at a conference in Australia, in Agile Australia. We'd also had him on our podcast, which you know that I do as well. And we've been backwards and forwards and had some really good conversations and struck up a great friendship. And I'm a real fan of the responsibility process. But it would be nice if you just give everybody a taste of who you are, Christopher.
Yeah, so who I am today is someone with 30 years of experience on the front lines of leadership in businesses around the world, focusing on the fact that leadership is responsibility, and therefore how does responsibility work in the mind. And it all started because I was trying to figure out how to teach software project leaders I was going to say years, decades ago, how to build project teams. And I did a great job of it. And after about 10 years of that, wrote a book called Teamwork as an Individual Skill, Getting Your Work Done When Sharing Responsibility. I actually have a copy of it here.
I must admit, I haven't seen that book myself. Yeah.
This is the copy I've been carrying around for years.
Yeah.
I had an academic background in groups and teamwork and social psychology, and so I knew the literature, and I was searching for that one way to convey the very essence of teamwork to people, and I chose the idea of shared responsibility. So a team, for me, a team is a group of people that steps up to a shared responsibility, and when they do that, they organically change their behavior because now they care about something together more than they care about their individual title, job, role, department, etc. We know much more about that today after the 20 or so years of Agile than we knew back when I was doing this work. But that got me very interested in understanding, what is this responsibility stuff? I mean, my parents told me it was my character, and I learned that people either have it or don't have it. And if you're a leader and want something done, you better assign it to the people that have responsibility. But in my working with teams, I saw that there would be people who would be lackluster or disengaged, and then you'd have a series of conversations, and then all of a sudden they're engaged and they're owning it. So the idea of it being character trait or character flaw didn't fit anymore. So I went searching for what is responsibility, and specifically, how is it emergent? And that led me to a little phenomenological research project that had been going on for some time, that was outlining the cognitive process in our mind about how responsibility operates, and literally how we avoid responsibility and how we take it. So that's who I am.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, of course, that led you to writing the responsibility process book,
which I also happen to have here. Right?
Just happen to have a copy of that, yes, as I do, just beside me. So that's brilliant. You beat me to putting it up.
It is. So my pattern has been that I only write unique books that haven't been written before, and it's usually after 10 years in terms of the teamwork book, or 20 years in terms of the responsibility book, of deep work in that area.
Yeah, and once you'd started to do that, I know now you've moved into a different phase. So what I would say is, firstly, don't hesitate to read that book. It's a great book. But what should be about that next phase? You moved into, how do you actually take that book and the things that you've learned, and how do people get an opportunity to learn? So we talk about your immersion project and etc.
Oh, so yeah, so I'm completely dedicated to individuals, leaders, coaches who want to take charge of their life, who want to take 100% responsibility for their life, who want to stop coping in these mental states, and know how to constantly get to the mental state of responsibility, which you can simply think of as the mental state of responsibility as the mental state of freedom, choice, and power. That's where we feel great about who we are, what we're doing, the choices in front of us. And in these other mental states, we're coping with crap that we don't know how to get rid of. And so what we're doing is, I did a lot of workshops for a lot of years, and I think Tony was in one of those.
I was.
And what I found is that short-term workshops didn't really achieve a lasting change in people. And the reason is that we have deep, deep, deep cultural conditioning to coping. Right? So the news teaches us blame and justify, right? Most of the news is all about blame and justify, and every now and then about a hero. Right? Parenting and management and teachers teach us about shame and obligation and quit, right? They called it so what society calls being a responsible person, I would call shame, obligation, quit, and responsibility, right? So when we're taught at a very early age to beat ourselves up if we make a mistake, and our society says, oh, good girl, she's taking responsibility, right?
Yeah.
And we're taught to do what we're supposed to do, or we're taught to do what we're supposed to do, even if we despise it, even if we hate it, right? Oh, good boy, Tony's taking responsibility. Right? And we're actually taught to give up on our dreams and what we really, really want because they're not practical. So we have this disengagement rate in society of 65%, right? Which for me is quit, right? We've given up on trying to find something valuable in this life to invest ourselves in. So all of those things are called being responsible by society. And to us, responsibility is only getting to that resourceful place in our mind where we can learn, grow, make changes, tap into our own genius, tap into our inspiration, be our authentic selves. And most people aren't doing that most of the time. Yeah. So we decided to really cut down on the workshops. And 10 years ago, I started experimenting with an ongoing program, which today is called Responsibility Mastery. And there are people in that program, and we meet, let me see, we offer anywhere from 4 to 8 Zoom calls a month for people in that program. And the sole reason for it is practice, 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 practice. And the way we practice is by catching ourselves coping, right? I don't like my boss. I don't like my job. My spouse doesn't like me. I hate paying the mortgage to the bank. I feel trapped, whatever it is we're coping with in life. And if we usually when we're stuck in it, the paradigm of that mental state is so powerful that we can't see our own way out of it. But when we get into mastery groups together and share where we're stuck, then other people can ask penetrating questions, right? And when I say other people, these calls are all hosted by a very advanced student. I host half of them and my mentor hosts the other half. And then there's other advanced students that are on the call. And so what happens in every call is multiple breakthroughs. I mean, just, head blown. The stuckness disappears and the person has immediate clarity about what they want and what they want to do next. And so I find that ongoing work to be much more valuable than just the one-off workshops. And you mentioned immersion. So we recently, I guess 2.5 years ago, because we're just starting cohort 6 and we do 2 cohorts a year. So we just recently started a 20-week immersive program for those who aren't ready to sign up for an unending membership, right? And so it's a 20-week program called Responsibility Immersion. And our goal is to immerse people in a culture of responsibility for 20 weeks. So they see how I operate and they see how my faculty operates. So there's 3 different kind of calls that we do. And the core module calls, I teach all of those. And then we have Q&A calls, and I have an international faculty of advanced students that hosts those calls. So people get exposed to people from all over the world, from different walks of life. who have a different responsibility journey than I do. But what happens in every call is we're practicing 100% responsibility every moment, and we're demonstrating that. And so people come into our calls and they experience that, and then they go back to their regular life and they're in meetings of blame and justifying shame and obligation, and come to our calls and see 100% responsibility, and then go back to their life and see the drama on TV and the drama at the dinner table, and come back to our calls. And over the period of 20 weeks, they transform their lives in amazing ways.
That's a brilliant thing, and I've been involved with it quite some time. So I really applaud what you do there. I want to take it a slightly little different direction, but still the same. You and I were having a chat just previous to this, as I do with most of the people that I interview. And one of the things we were talking about that you're really passionate about as leaders and coaches, and that deep expertise around being leaders and coaches, because the reality of it is that you know, you can go out and get a $25 certification and all of a sudden you're a coach, but does that qualify you to help people? Or, you know, because you can do a lot of institutional. I've been doing this long time myself. Like, I've been around this about 20 odd years, and I'm still learning, right? I still get it wrong. So it's about that. Talk to me about that, Chris, because I know you're really passionate about that.
Yeah, let's break it down into two parts: leadership and then coaching. Not that they're entirely different, but I have a little bit different twist for each. So so I often speak to groups of business leaders, and almost without fail, after every speech, especially live ones, the virtual ones, maybe this doesn't happen as often, but you know how people mill around the speaker afterwards and chat, and almost always somebody comes up to me and shakes my hand and says, "That was a mighty fine speech, Christopher, mighty fine." Says, "Now I know why I'm the responsible one in my company, but I'm surrounded by all these people that, you know, don't do their job. I mean, what do I do about them?" And, you know, I have so many thoughts to myself at that time, because here's the lack of awareness that's happening. And, you know, Socrates, Jesus, Buddha, they all said that there's only one problem in the world, and that is unawareness. Right? So elevating consciousness is the thing to do to grow as a leader or as a coach. But so there I'm facing somebody who just absorbed an hour on the responsibility process, and they totally don't see that they're blaming their people. Right? So, you know, I'm the responsible one. What do I do about all these people? Darn. Right? And so I have two directions to go. I say, well, one, I can help you with that. You know, can we have a discovery phone call? And I can mentor you. The other is to just go right into the keys to responsibility, which have to do with consciousness raising. So I could say, well, how did you attract those people to your company? Right? And how did you select them? And how did you onboard them? And how did you train them? And have you been reinforcing them? And have you been managing your systems and culture all these years to create what they are? Right? So the message there is that leadership is responsibility, period. Right? And it starts with self-leadership. And self-leadership, this is an amazing compass for self-leadership, right? If you're operating below the line, you're not leading, right? So if I show up to a staff meeting and I'm the CEO, and I start by complaining about our customers or complaining about our suppliers, right? Or blaming a supplier or justifying the market or justifying COVID or whatever, I'm probably, mostly what I'm doing is showing them how to escape responsibility and keep their job at this company. So for leaders, I define leadership as responsibility, and that's all it is. And for starting with self-leadership, what I say is, if you get clear about who you are authentically and where your genius is and where your inspiration is and what your ethics and values and beliefs are, if you get clear about all that, And then if you find a big project to pursue, a big opportunity or a big space in the market or a big problem in the world, don't be surprised if you don't see, hundreds of people flocking to work with you. So that's, my motto is lead yourself first, and all leadership is 99% self-leadership. I'll say one more thing about that, Tony, and that is that I think all of our teaching about leadership traits and leadership styles and leadership behaviors, for one thing, it's always changing year to year, right? About today's fad, right? The latest thing is empathy is the number one leadership trait, right? So here's my belief, is that we're sold out on the idea that leadership is a main effect, right? That it's a linear concept. And my observation is that true leadership is a byproduct of being in pursuit of something important that's bigger than you, and therefore you need to attract help. So the leadership industry over the last 50 years has turned leadership into a main effect, and I teach that it's the byproduct of actually taking ownership of some big space that you see yourself inspired by and want to change. And then it's bigger than you, so you've got to find people to help. That's leadership.
So I want to ask you a question about that. And so I concur with much of what you're doing there. And for those who are watching this cast, of course, the remote agility framework and a lot of the work that we've built into it, I won't lie, and I've said that to you, there are a lot of influences of the responsibility process, which is interesting. With the changes in the last 2 years, that lightning rod change that's thrown us into this pandemic, and everybody's working from home, what we see is leadership in itself has had to evolve and change. How do you see that being affected now? Do you see a lot of below the line rather than above the line, or what's been your experience?
A lot of freak out, a lot of people, caught unaware. And in the beginning of the pandemic, what I heard, saw, read, learned from my own people in my networks and community, and I started writing about and doing webinars about, just the pandemic or COVID is the number one justify in the world today.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So it doesn't matter how big or small the justification is, it's still a justify. You're still letting yourself off the hook from growing to overcome it by saying that that's your problem.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly astute grab of it, because the things that I also see is that it's become a real excuse to go, well, I'm going to micromanage, I'm going to go deep, and in some defense, that's because the system's not set up, or they haven't thought about the way that they lead in terms of changing that mechanism now that people are not where they are. But there's still a big piece of leadership to play in this. Would you agree?
Well, sure. And in terms of individuals, the people that you and I serve are the smartest, busiest people in the world, right? They're well educated, they have good jobs, they care about their family, and they care about society, they care about being contributors, and they care about personal improvement. But they're focused in the paradigms of intellectual improvement and character or morality improvement, because that's the way society raised us. So there's another aspect to us that society and our parents completely ignored, and that's consciousness. That's understanding how our mind works and understanding how to take ownership of our minds so that we can take ownership of our life. So for me, this is the fastest way I know to consciousness growth, because this gets triggered every day when things go wrong, and things go wrong many times a day. And every time something gets triggered, my mind goes to blame, which is a mental state. And I can stay there for a short time or a long time, right? And when I adopt that as a mental state, then it has its own cause-effect logic. And then I use my intellect, which I've spent my whole life developing, in order to prove that somebody else is wrong. Somebody else has to change before I can be happy. So another thing we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years is we see all of the, it's like an author I read said, the game on the planet right now is who's been the most aggrieved, who's the biggest loser, who's the biggest victim, who most needs a payoff from somebody else, right? So what I've seen during the pandemic is that the people who have started doing and continue to do what we call our inner work, they were much more prepared for the pandemic than people who hadn't started working on their consciousness and on developing, mastering how their mind works. Because when you do that, what you learn is that there is no constancy in the world. There is no normal, right? There's only the new hurdle and figuring out how to grow to continue to have a lovely life during that hurdle. And I see the same thing with companies about how they're handling that, right? Those companies that are operating at higher levels of consciousness, I think, are handling it much better.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. So let's just go to the next piece of that, because I don't want to lose that. Is the coaching piece of it as well, because that whilst leadership is coaching is leadership, there is that significant piece where people are making an industry out of coaching. Let's talk a little bit about that, Christopher.
Sure. I just want you to know you're breaking up a little bit from me, and I'm going to pretend that I know what you asked me and answer the coaching piece.
Yes.
So, yeah. So, so coaches get stuck too, right? And in organizations, the number one coping mechanism in organizations is that management blames the people and people blame the management. And I've seen the same with coaches who are very frustrated, coaches who are very knowledgeable, who have high technical expertise, even have pretty high people expertise. But they're making the assumption that other people should want and should do and should be as the coach says. And I have these conversations very often with coaches who are frustrated in their coaching assignment because they can't get people to listen, or one of the huge complaints is they can't coach up, right? They can't get leadership, management to pay attention and buy in. And so what I teach there is, I often ask, when was the last time that you changed yourself? And to be either a leader or a coach of other people, if you want someone else to change and they're not buying your pitch, then all that means from a responsibility view is, what are you going to change in yourself so that they want to follow you or they want your teaching? Right? So, to use myself as an example, 30 years ago, I set out to change how the world thinks about responsibility. And I wasn't authorized to do it. I didn't know how I was going to make a living. But it's what truly inspired me, and it's the problem in the world that I saw needing to be solved. I made a lot of mistakes over the years. My early mistakes were being preachy, right? You should take responsibility, right? People never wanted to hear that. But every time I found myself not getting done what I was trying to get done, sure, I could blame the audience, or I could justify that, I'm trying to create a path where there is no path. I certainly spent a lot of time beating myself up. But the truth was that every time I just had to get to the mental state of owning the fact that if I wanted to figure out how to move the world or move the audience or get to the next level. It was up to me to change. So that wonderful principle, for things to change, first I must change.
Yeah,
and I've had that conversation with so many coaches who feel stuck and frustrated.
Yeah, I agree, and I think let me give you some sort of my own feedback on this. Is that the responsibility process, when I first came across it, and then I was lucky to spend some time with you when you were out here, and we've had some backwards and forwards, and applying it changed the way that I work with people. But it not only did that, my coaching stance, because your coaching stances can often be that prescriptive and insert yourself, and it changed that method for me, where it's around actually helping people understand where they are in that are you above the line or below the line, and the language. The other thing around that, Christopher, I really wanted to let you know before we ended this, was that it also changed within my own family. I've a teenage boy who's just starting university. I've got a teenage girl just starting high school, and my wife and I know, obviously, with pandemic pressures and stuff, it's been quite interesting because I introduced that, and we have this conversation now. Are you above the line? I've had my 18-year-old call me on that and say, "Hey, Dad, are you below the line today?" And so that's an interesting change for us to have a conversation. So I just wanted to give you that feedback. But in terms of the coaching, I see that so much. And it's also thinking about when you're doing that coaching and leader and coaching thing, is it all applies in the same method as well.
Yeah. So for me, it's the most foundational framework I know for leading or coaching, for leading myself, leading others, coaching others. Yeah. And in terms of your story, I want to fill in for your audience that I'm sure that you had an agreement within your family at your dinner table or breakfast table that you could ask that of each other.
We did.
So the one of the things that we teach about the responsibility process is that it only works when self-applied, and it's going to backfire every time you try and hit somebody else over the head with it. And what we do teach is, if you want to practice it, recruit somebody, and a father, daughter, or family is great, and teach it to them and invite them to lovingly, compassionately, call you out if they see you below the line.
That is definitely the conversation of the contract that we had. It was quite interesting. We had I'm not going to plug the paraphernalia, but we do have the magnet on the fridge. We quite often point to the magnet on the fridge. So.
Right. Yeah.
Look, we're very close to the end of our time, Christopher, and I've been, really appreciative of you coming on. How can people get involved? This is the opportunity if you let them know how to get in touch.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you just the one best way, and that is to browse over to responsibility.com and or go to responsibility.com/join, JOIN. On most of our pages, there'll be a little orange join button in the top right corner, or I guess it's kind of a fleshy pink color. And read about our community. So we have a large DIY community where we send out newsletters about every 2 weeks. And it's all content and no selling. And if you want to be sold, you have to actually click a button that says, "I want more information about this product or service." And when you join our community, I will send you a series of 4 emails that introduces you to the community, introduces you to the responsibility process, introduces you to the 3 keys, and then finally, it's 5 emails, introduces you to the company and my colleagues at the Responsibility Company, and then a 5th email that tells you about all of our different products. And I think that's the best way. Get into what we call our DIY, do-it-yourself community. That's
fantastic. It's fantastic. Look, we are at the end of our time. I just want to thank you again. Thank you for spending the time with Christopher Avery. And I can say to anyone who's out there, I've had experience with this and I found it great, and just try it out. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Tony. This has been a blast.